Welcome to 10 Rules for Profitable Growth. I'm Rick Slark, owner and founder of Slark Consulting Group. This 10 Rules for Growth, Profitable Growth, came out of a study that was recently done over a 10-year period of time that included 3,000 businesses from a variety of industries. And what they determined was the industries or businesses that were winning in the survey and this study had 10 common denominators, characteristics that we call 10 rules for profitable growth. The first thing that we want to do is look at an industry S-curve. So this industry S-curve would represent your business or your industry. The left axis is profitability. The right bottom one is time. The middle dotted line is average for your industry. And then we see below the industry line is our businesses that are not performing well. To the far right, we see accelerated returns. These businesses are doing very well. Then we have an industry or efficiency plateau. This is where most businesses in your industry will live, just above the efficiency plateau. In other words, very average, little growth over a period of time. And this will help us to represent where we are or where you are in your industry. So are you, for instance, on this middle line, the efficiency plateau? Are you in the middle? Are you down toward the lower half? Or are you up toward the accelerated half? It really makes a big difference as to which ones of the 10 that you are going to use or which ones you're going to pay more attention to is dependent upon where you are on this curve. So it's very important to identify yourself on this curve and on this industry line. So for instance, if you're over to the right, then that would mean that you're doing pretty well and that you really have to fine tune and refine some of the things that you're doing. If you're on this tail end, that means that there's a lot of room for improvement. I'll hear a lot of businesses that are starting out and over in this area, and they'll go, well, we had 30% growth. Well, when you have very little market share, it's easy to get 30% growth. But when you have become efficient and you're doing pretty well, it's harder to squeeze that market share, and you have to be more strategic and more refined as you do that. So let's dive in. First of all, I want you to notice that in this study, there were 1 in 10 businesses experienced more than 10% annual growth over 10 years. Let me say that again. Only 1 in 10 businesses experienced more than 10% growth over 10 years. So this is very difficult to do, and it takes a lot of attention and a lot of focus. So let's look at the common denominators of the study winners and see what we come up with and see how you can apply those to your business. Rule number 1 is competitive advantage first. All of the winners in the study had a deep understanding of their industry, and not only their industry, but their positioning in the industry. So you might have several competitors that are doing the same thing. And as you look at that map of your industry, can you position yourself into an area where no one is playing? All of them had a very deep understanding of how their competitors worked, what their competitive advantage was, in other words, how they were different, and where they played in the industry itself. So competitive advantage, you have to know and be very comfortable with how you are different than all of your competitors. And let me say, it's not just being good to customers. It's not just having a clean building. Those things are just tickets to play the game. All right. So you have to have a very, very good competitive advantage first understanding. Rule number 2 is to make the trend your friend. So in every industry, yours included, there are certain trends that are happening. There are certain little niches and little tailwinds that you should begin to use and apply to your business. And so you are moving forward and have some momentum because of those trends. You do not want to constantly fight the headwinds. So look for trends in your industry. Where is it that I can see some things happening? It could be technology. It could be consumer behavior, that the behavior of the clients are starting to be in a certain way. They're starting to favor a certain type of business, product or service. Get behind that and allow that to take you with some ease into some growth. The third rule is to outgrow your peers. This can be very difficult. So let's say you have an industry where everybody kind of does everything the same way. One of the things that you have to do is look for ways in your industry that you can outgrow your peers. Now, there's a couple of things that I want to say here. First of all, it is in the business, there are products and services and operations and processes that you need to employ that will make a difference and help you outgrow your peers. But there's also some professional development that you as the owner need to do and to brush up on some skills and develop your maybe your sales skill, your communication skills, your hiring skills, your marketing skills. You need as a advisor to learn how to professionally develop some skills in your business. Now, one of the things that happens if you've kind of been in the crowd and now you're trying to step out of the crowd and you're trying to develop and you're trying to work, a lot of the peers that you have will think that you're a know-it-all, or they might begin to criticize you for wondering who you are. How did you get to be this person, right? And it could hurt your feelings when you've been friends with some of these competitors and then you are stepping away. Or even if they're not in the industry, there will be people that are around you, sometimes friends, sometimes family, and they'll be going, "What are you doing?" Right? "Who do you think you are?" Right? "What makes you think you can do this?" And that's where the quote comes in. You don't fail by walking away. You fail by staying somewhere you've outgrown. So even though that's slightly uncomfortable, right, you have to make that change. I experienced that early in my career when I began to decide, I decided I was going to make a difference. I was going to be different. And we began to step out. And some of my people that were near me were very critical of it. And it hurts a little bit, but you have to determine, am I going to stay in the crowd, in the average, or am I going to move along that toward that accelerated profitability that we saw earlier today? So that's what we want you to see. You got to outgrow them sometimes. Rule number 4, turbocharge your core. So this is really important. 80% of a company's growth comes by their core business or from their core. So what is it that you do? What is the main thing you do? What product is your main product? What service is your main service? What do you do as a core part of your business? You have to get this right. You have to turbocharge your core. If 80% of your profits, 80% of your development comes from your core, then you need to focus on it and you need to drill down deep on it. One of the things I see too early is that people do okay with their core and they start making a little money, start getting a few customers, and then they begin to add another product or add another service and then another and then another. And before long, you're okay with the core, but then you've begun to focus on these other services or products, and you begin to water down the entire business, and you don't do any of them particularly well. And in this study, the people that won, the businesses that won, turbocharged their core. They focused really significantly on their core and they won there. Another stat that's very important, 2% chance of growing 5% annually if the core isn't growing. Only 2% chance if you are growing 5% annually if the core isn't growing. But if it is growing, you have a 41% chance of growing 5% annually. Significant. So make sure that you pay attention to your core. And most of you listening to me need a lot of work right there, right? You need to do work on your core. Rule number 5, when you have that right, then you can look beyond the core. Now, we said earlier that 80% of your core was where your growth came, or 80% of your growth came from the core. But that leaves 20% of growth that comes from outside of your core, and that's a significant number. So if you're growing 80%, or if you have 80% of your core income and you're doing well with that, you're fine. But then you can move on and pick up that other 20% by moving beyond your core. Rule number 6 is to grow where you know. Once you decide to move outside of your core, it's very important to kind of stay in adjacent areas. Don't go out and do something that has nothing to do with your current business, right? It's not time for that. There is a time and a place for that, but this isn't the time if you want to move forward on the growth curve. So grow where you know, be adjacent, let it fit together with your core products, let it fit together with your core industry, and be the expert in that area. Rule number 7 is be the local hero. Only 1 in 5 companies that have medium growth rates or that have below median growth rates in the local market can outgrow their peers. So if you're not winning at home, if you're not winning in your local geography, if you're not winning in your industry at home, you really don't have a chance of moving the business forward. You have to win locally, right? You have to be the expert. You have to become the local hero. Again, too many of us focus on a second, third location, fourth location, when we should be really honing in on becoming a local hero in our core product. All right. Rule number 8, if you can beat local, all right, if you can beat local and win local, then it's time to expand. And being global doesn't necessarily mean around the world, although it certainly could in the environment that we're in. But it means to expand. It means to go beyond the local geographical area and expand. So if you can beat the local, then you can go global. Rule number 9. This is an important part of business that a lot of us have not really thought about. But once we reach a certain point, there is a strategy that these successful businesses in the survey used, and that was to merge and acquire other businesses in their adjacencies. So it is a very known fact that if you buy a business and you have done the right preparation for this, you can turbocharge your growth. You can move forward in that S curve significantly, more so than if you wait and grow it organically. So, but you have to do it systematically or programmatically for sure. So that's rule number 9. And rule number 10 is shrink to grow. Now, what I mean by that is, let's say that you have been going along and now your resources are thin, your employees are thin, your money is thin. You might think we've overextended ourselves. And that does happen. And I'll give you an example in just a minute. So it's okay to cut some of those things that we've been doing to cut the product line, cut the service line, cut the second location or third location, and pull it back, and then collect those resources, and then strategically move forward again. So a perfect example of this is Wendy's is doing this right now. Wendy's has looked at their underperforming stores in underperforming areas. And they are now beginning to unveil a new concept store that involves better technology, better processes. And so it's way better for them to cut these older stores out than remodel them, because they're underperforming and because the neighborhoods have changed. And so they're just cutting their losses with that, which are not losses at all, really, because they're selling the buildings, they're selling that, they're bringing the resources back in, and then reevaluating where they will build these new stores. And they have some capital that they've saved and resources they've saved to be able to do that. So rule number 10, shrinking to grow, is certainly a great option and rule for profitability. Now, I want to end with this. So you can't do all of these at one time. You can't employ all of these 10 rules at one time. If you do, you go very broad but not very deep. Notice here that 1% of the study companies in the survey or in the study did 8 of these. So only 1% of the 3,000 businesses did 8 of these levers that we've talked about. 10% of the study companies did 6, and 0 to 1 of the 10 did the 10, which equaled no growth or loss. So you have to decide. And earlier when I began this, identifying where you are on the growth chart or on the S curve will determine how many of these levers you should employ, right? And so what I'm asking you to decide now is, based on this information, what step do you need to take first? Which one of these rules would it be good for you to employ? And what actions do you need to take? If you'd like to have more information about this or take a deeper dive or perhaps work together, you can contact me at the number there or the QR code. So thanks for listening. I hope you got something out of this and it was beneficial to you. So here's the last thing I will say. The knowledge is wonderful, but it is implementation that makes the difference. So make sure that you pick one and then you employ it or you implement it into your situation. All right. Thank you for listening.